Hey there retro games fans, this is Andy C from Piece of 8-Bit. Welcome to this week's video. So normally, you know me, I am a pretty positive person when it comes to these videos. I like a lot of things, I like a lot of consoles, but I'm going to be asking something that's a little bit more negative today, a little bit glass half empty, and that is, what the hell was up with the 7th generation of consoles? So for those of you who know, I have got the Xbox 360 sitting in the living room at the moment as part of my month with, and it got me thinking about this generation. And I'm going to just caveat this here before everybody turns off and says, hey, this is just your first video on Xbox 360 for your mainstream on a Friday, and you're already going to be bashing it, and I know what you're going to be talking about. But I am going to be just focusing on the 7th generation, in particular the PlayStation's Yellow Light of Death and the Xbox 360's Red Ring of Death, which really were quite interesting hardware failures, quite an interesting period in console history, and a bit of a departure from what we were used to in previous generations. So I wanted to talk about that. I know it is the first main video that I've done for the Xbox 360, and the first thing I'm talking about is probably its most notorious failure, but I just thought it was quite an interesting topic. And like I said, I'm not just going to be picking on the Xbox here. Sony, you know what I'm talking about, so we'll talk a little bit about Sony's Yellow Light of Death as well. So without any further ado, let's get into the topic, and let's just reappraise ourselves of how we got to where we are just as the 7th generation was dawning, and exactly what happened and what went wrong. I'll see you there. Right, well, let's give ourselves a little bit of background here, right? So before we even headed into the 7th generation, then the previous generation didn't really prepare us for this, did it? So we had the PlayStation 2, of course, in the previous generation. Yeah, it might have had the occasional temperamental disc tray problem. I know mine is looking a little bit ropey now. It's 25 years old. I mean, you know, this was a thing. Xbox had a recall on the power brick, but again, not a big deal really. GameCube, I don't recall any issues with the GameCube. Seemed pretty bomb-proof. And then when you go back even further, hardware reliability was just not something that was on our minds. I mean, it's just not something we thought about. I've got a SNES that's sitting here that's, I don't know, more years than I can work out in my brain. Probably 35 years old. A Mega Drive that's a similar sort of age. We had a few contact issues with the games. Nothing that a bit of, well, you could blow into the cartridges, of course, but nothing a few cotton buds and a little bit of isopropyl alcohol wouldn't sort. The only thing I really remember was having to turn the PlayStation upside down after a number of years of owning one. Sometimes it would stop reading discs properly, so you turned it upside down and it would sort itself out. And that was actually down to a problem with where they put the power supply next to the to where the laser was for the CDs, and it basically used to get too hot and it would warp a little bit and you'd struggle to read your discs. They actually resolved that in later versions, but none of these things were really catastrophic. They were kind of quirks, really. So heading into the 7th generation, our eyes wide open, maybe or maybe not, then obviously we were in for a little bit of a surprise, whether you're a Sony PlayStation owner, PlayStation 3 owner, or whether you were a Xbox owner. Yeah, you were in for a bit of a treat. Now, Nintendo sat on the sidelines, laughing, no doubt, because the Nintendo Wii, which I won't be talking about today, and the reason I won't be talking about that today is because the Nintendo Wii was practically bomb-proof. You could kick it down the stairs and you could probably still load Wii Sports. Frankly, the thing was indestructible, apart from a few little issues here and there, maybe the odd disc read issue, those kind of things. They just weren't known for having faults. They were a quality bit of kit, which is more than can be said, perhaps, for our main protagonists in this story, Microsoft and Sony. So let's dig straight in to our first guilty party, shall we say, which is Microsoft and the Xbox 360 and its infamous Red Ring of Death. I'll see you there. Okay, let's talk about the Xbox 360 and the infamous Red Ring of Death. Well, the Xbox 360 launched in 2005 and it immediately took off. It was cheaper than the PlayStation 3, it was easier to develop for, and of course it had Xbox Live, which was very much the gold standard at the time. The games were phenomenal, and Microsoft, of course, had an entire year one full year head start ahead of Sony. Problem was, often the console would barely make even that year. It could barely survive long enough even to play some of those games and to be ready for Sony's onslaught in 2006. And it was a perfect storm of issues. Well, let's explore what happened then. So we had lead-free solder, which was mandated by new regulations at the time, and it's not the first time we're going to hear about lead-free solder in this video, I can tell you. It had extreme heat output, which was from the early CPU, GPU designs. Many largely considered those to have been rushed to market, so that year's head start, maybe that was a little bit foolhardy in the end. There was some motherboard flexing, so under those extreme heat outputs, the motherboard could flex under temperature cycles. That, of course, could lead to chips popping out as a result of that lead-free solder not being quite so good. And it had the infamous X clamp, which was a cheap mounting bracket that basically said, I'm trying my best, and just wasn't good enough and wasn't up to the job. So yes, rushed production essentially to beat Sony to the market may not necessarily have paid off, and essentially what happened as cracks formed beneath key components, the system's brains effectively disconnected from its body, and when that happened, users were greeted with that most infamous light show, which was the 3 flashing red LEDs. They reckon that failure estimates were between 30 and 60% depending on the batch, and this was, to put it politely, not ideal. And the impact of this, of course, was that the red ring of death wasn't just a hardware issue. It became a brand crisis, and Microsoft eventually extended their warranties to 3 years. They set aside $1.15 billion to fix or replace affected consoles. Not the greatest start. And of course, here's the real tragedy. Without the red ring of death, the Xbox 360 could well have won that generation outright. It was a pretty close run thing when you look at the sales figures in the end, and you know, maybe Xbox 360 might have just pipped it. It definitely had the momentum, it definitely had the games, it had the developer support, it had the online ecosystem which Sony couldn't match. But ultimately, reliability matters, and millions of angry customers matter even more. But our other protagonist in this story, Sony, was not without its own faults, and I have memories of this in particular. So let's talk about Sony's yellow light of death in the next section. So, the PS3's yellow light of death. Well, Sony didn't escape the generational curse either. The early PlayStation 3 models, essentially, especially the backwards compatible 60 gig units, ran hot enough to warm your living room. They were super warm, and I remember this because I had the launch PS3. And between that huge cell processor and the NVIDIA GPU, and yes, I said I'd mention it again, that lead-free solder, failures eventually crept in. So the yellow light of death was a lot less common than the red ring of death, but the cause was eerily similar. And from what I remember of this as well is in those original launch ones, depending on how you had your console sitting, that solder would basically crack and chips would pop out. And I think it was the GPU that was particularly guilty of this. And you would switch your PlayStation on one morning, and for me, I was playing, I think it was either Grand Theft Auto or Red Dead Redemption, and it was running particularly hot. And when I came back down in the morning and I turned it on, I was greeted with the wondrous yellow light of death. And yeah, it was those cracked solder joints, that heat stress, and the components losing contact with the motherboard. That was the same problem that Microsoft had as well. But they didn't face the same catastrophic return rates as Microsoft, but the yellow light of death still became a well-known fear among early adopters, especially collectors, in 2025. Now, I have looked at buying an original launch console. I no longer own my launch PlayStation 3 console, which I bought on day one. I had it for quite a long time before I saw that failure. But I was devastated when it happened, and I did the trick, which was the same trick that people suggested for the Xbox as well, which is that you wrapped it in a towel and basically blew a hairdryer into the back of it to essentially melt the solder. And you know what? It actually worked. But I'd already bought another PlayStation by then. I bought a PlayStation Slim, PlayStation 3 Slim, and yeah, that was that was the end of it really, because when I did that trick, I pretty much melted the PlayStation, the plastic on the outside. So whilst it worked, it was just long enough for me to get any essential bits off there. That's another story for another day, because it wasn't really that fruitful in the end, and I lost a lot of save data and all sorts of other things as well off the back of that. But there you go. So Sony also not without their same problem caused by that lead-free solder, which is still something we see these days. And of course, yes, whilst these two consoles were sat there, the Wii sat there being the Wii. And yeah, in the 7th generation, well, if you wanted reliability, that was the thing. And the biggest hardware issue ultimately was the damage to your television when people lost grip of the controller and held it at their TV. There was no heat issues, there were no solder issues, there was not a motherboard trying to impersonate a Pringle. It was just broken living room screens and an unfortunate wave of replacement wrist straps. And that was really, for Nintendo, it was the most Nintendo problem ultimately you could imagine. Let's talk now about what happened next. So how did the big manufacturers ultimately fix their consoles? I'll see you in there. So what did they do to resolve the problems? Obviously a huge issue for both Sony and Microsoft. Microsoft in particular, this was acute. The failure rate was so massive, this was just a huge problem. And I seem to recall at the time, Microsoft didn't really acknowledge what was going on. They sort of kind of swept it under the carpet a little bit. But to be fair to them, they did offer full refunds for repairs that had happened previously. So people who'd got the issue fixed, they did give full refunds for that in the end. They extended the warranty to 3 years, yeah, they sort of fixed the issues as they went. And then there were newer generations of the console itself as well. So we had Falcon and Jasper, which came later, which had improved cooling and fixed it. My favourite is the Slim, which was the last sort of generation of the Xbox 360, and they removed the red ring of death problem by removing the red LEDs from the console itself. But it was a massively redesigned system, and essentially they removed the components that were causing the problem and redesigned the console. So actually, joking aside, by the time the last sort of generation of the Xbox 360 came out, and it was the 7th generation was well into its stride at this point, those problems had gone away. But people don't forget, of course. What did Sony do? Well, Sony, it was a bit quieter, because ultimately this wasn't a problem that people saw a lot, although I saw it. But I did own my PlayStation for quite a while before I had that failure. I think I replaced it in 2012, so some 6 years actually after I bought the console. So it's quite a long time really before I saw a problem with it, and I think it was a later life issue with the yellow light of death. But Sony did offer warranty repairs. They were very quiet about it back in the day. They did offer quiet warranty repairs for people, and they did replace discs that were broken. And then of course we had the Slim, which is the version of the PlayStation 3 that I've got, and then the Super Slim, which again, similar to the Xbox, had removed a lot of the components or changed the design in such a way that this problem wouldn't occur any further. So if you're looking for new versions of PlayStation 3s or Xbox 360s in 2025, then definitely go and look at some of the newer variants of those particular consoles if you want to avoid those issues. Of course, if you are a collector, I would love to get myself on a launch console. In the UK, we have a company called CEX who sell second-hand games and technology and all that sort of stuff. They actually offer a 5-year warranty on consoles. So if you did want to launch PlayStation 3 or an Xbox launch console, that's probably the place to get it. Somewhere like that will offer you a warranty and repair it for you. And these things are repairable. So if you've got the skills, then you can have a go at repairing this stuff yourself. Xbox 360 was a little trickier though, having said that, but neither were trivial, which is why I never tried it. And yeah, I wouldn't necessarily recommend the towel trick, the fix it yourself issue. It might work, but it won't last forever. Yeah, it's probably not the safest or smartest thing to do either. Like I said, I actually melted the plastic on my PlayStation 3, so by the time I'd sorted that out, it was done for anyway. And I had to prise the top off it to get the disc out that was stuck in there, because when the yellow light of death happened, you couldn't do anything. You couldn't even eject a disc. So it was properly dead. So yeah, very, very depressing. It was one of those things you turn it off and leave it for a bit and hope when you come back the next day it will sort itself out, but it never did, sadly. So there you go. So let's wrap up then. Let's after that tale of woe, let's talk a little bit about what happened in the 7th generation, and give you my final thoughts. I'll see you there. Well, I hope you found that interesting. It's obviously, there are not the full detail there. There's lots of detail to go and find. I'll put a few of my sources into the links below as well for you to go and do a little bit more research. But I just thought it was a very interesting period of history as we start to look at the 7th generation, and the 7th generation becomes getting, well, as we know, the Xbox 360 has just reached 20 years. The PlayStation 3 won't be far behind. And for me, that's when I start to consider these things to be old and retro. So if you are thinking about going out and collecting and getting back into this generation in particular, then this is an interesting tale because it is an important part of history. The question is, why was the 7th generation so bad for reliability? Well, firstly, I think when we talk about PlayStation, I don't think the reliability was perhaps as bad as Microsoft, but both had reliability issues. And I think the problem with the 7th generation was one of ambition. So this is the first time that we were seeing HD gaming, and it was really pushing the limits of what we could achieve with hardware at the time. People expected a lot, and the consoles were expected to deliver a lot of that power, and they were expected to deliver it at a reasonable price, and they were expected to deliver it in an ergonomic box that sits in your living room. So that's a tall order, and I think ultimately it was down to that perfect storm of needing to use lead-free solder because that's what regulations said you needed to do, but also the fact that you were just running this enormous amount of power and processing capability through these boxes that were probably not best optimized for shifting heat out of the way. So it was a perfect storm of expectation, of graphics ability, of high definition. We also were into the generation of online gaming as well, so we were expecting a hell of a lot out of our consoles. Yeah, maybe the technology just wasn't quite ready for it yet. So it is a tale of woe, and it is an interesting one. It goes back to the days when we talk about what would have happened if Sony had continued to pair up with Nintendo. Would we have the PlayStation? It's one of those defining moments, I think, in console history where we start to consider, well, actually, could Xbox 360 have won this generation had it not been for the Red Ring of Death? Now, I'm playing through with the Xbox 360 this month, and I can tell you now, if you've not been an Xbox 360 player before, it is a fantastic console. It is an amazing, amazing console, and the games are incredible, and I'm loving it. It's really, really good. And you know what? As someone who hasn't really played Xbox 360 before, and someone who was very much a Sony fanboy at the time, I am beginning to accept the fact that I think the Xbox 360 might well have been the better console. But, you know, ultimately, that reliability thing, who knows what could have been. But it was an important generation nonetheless. With all those reliability points aside, it was the advent of HD gaming, and it was really where we saw online gaming go stratospheric for the first time. And yeah, it is, you know, it is an important generation. There are lots and lots of great games, and I think, to be honest with you, I think it's probably the last big leap as well. I talk about the leap between the PS1 and the PS2 being huge. I think the leap between the PS2 and the PS3, or the Xbox and the Xbox 360, was also quite large. And I think the next generational leap, now we're into HD gaming, was less. So this generation, this 7th generation of consoles, was an important one, and there are some great games still to be played out there. But yeah, buyer beware, I think, is the moral of this story. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed that. I enjoyed going and doing a bit of research on that and finding out really what happened. And as somebody who experienced one of those failures as well, I was keen to understand a little bit more, other than, yeah, just wrap it in a towel and bung a hairdryer in the back and see what happens. But yeah, hope you found that interesting. I will be on to more positive things next week, and in fact, indeed, stuff coming up in the channel. So we've got some more bit-betweens with some Xbox 360 games. I was going to do, Halo 3 you will have already seen. I was going to have a look at Forza Horizon, but I am struggling to get that recorded, so it might be something different. So stay tuned for that on Wednesday. Got the Lego Big Build continuing. I'm getting way through that now. It is a very, very challenging build if you're into your Lego. I am doing the Lego Pac-Man cabinet throughout a build throughout Advent up to Christmas Eve. So if you're interested in that, there's a little video that goes live every other day, there or thereabouts, with a couple of minutes sped up of me building it. So if that is your thing, go check it out. And there's a little bit of Christmas music and some cheesy Christmas jumpers thrown in for good measure. So go and check that out, or just, if you really don't want to watch all of them, join me on the 24th of December, where it'll be finished and you can see what it looks like. So that's been really good fun as well. Yeah, and there'll probably be some sort of review coming up through the month as we get towards the end of 2025. Well, that might spill into January, but I am probably going to take a bit of a break over Christmas, to be honest, because I have been making videos almost every week for 2 years. So it is probably time I took a week off, maybe, but I don't know. I get too addicted and I end up doing it anyway. That all said, I am now rambling, so I will leave you there. Thanks ever so much for watching. If you do enjoy these videos, of course, please do hit that like and subscribe button. Really do appreciate it. Hit a 750 subscriber landmark. That's the right one, isn't it? Recently, so thank you so much for your support. And that number, yeah, it's not a massive, number like some YouTubers have, but to me, it's huge, and it means 750 people have been interested enough to hit that button. So thank you so much for tuning in and supporting my channel. Other than that, just leaves me to say, please do all take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, bye for now.